Hey everyone, this is Nick, and it's time for a small rant today. I keep seeing people saying that the Linux desktop isn't ready, or the usual year of the Linux desktop in 2050 sort of meme, or that Linux isn't for professionals but just for hobbyists and enthusiasts. So I thought I would make a quick video about the topic just to dispel this very obviously wrong notion. And I thought I would include this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by SquareSpace, and most of you probably already know about it, but if you don't, all you have to remember is that it's your all-in-one solution to build and publish your own website. Even if you don't know anything about how to build a website and you don't know how to code, Squarespace just lets you get started in no time. You pick a template, you drag and drop the various blocks you want, you customize them with the various colors and themes, and you're good to go. And when you want to move forward and enrich your website with a bunch of other features, you can add a video gallery, an online store with online payments, or even a members-only area, and a lot more. And if you need a logo or you need a domain name, Squarespace can also help you with that. So if you need a new website and you don't know how to get started, just click the link in the description below or head over to squarespace.com/thelinuxexperiment and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. Now, the first thing is that very obviously Linux is already everywhere and used by professionals every day. I could take the example of Android, which is the most popular smartphone OS in the world, definitely used by professionals every day, and using a Linux kernel. Sure, it's heavily modified, but it's still Linux. But this isn't Linux. It's not what we mean when we're talking about Linux-based operating systems for computers. So I could instead turn to the absolute domination of Linux on the server space. Linux runs 96% of the top 1 million web servers. That's 960,000 out of a million servers. If running a server isn't a professional task, I don't know what is. And by extension, all these servers have to be administered by, you guessed it, professionals. I could also point to every NAS out there generally using a Linux kernel. If we look at IoT and small appliances, Linux also dominates the space, running virtually all smart home gadgets and devices used by, you guessed it, professionals and enthusiasts alike to monitor and interact with a lot of systems. But here again, that's not exactly what people mean. People mean that the Linux desktop isn't ready for desktop use. So let's look at why this opinion is pretty much wrong. The first obvious counter-argument is developers. Linux is used by 47% of professional developers. That's higher than the market share of macOS among developers. If close to half of them use and prefer Linux, then I think it's safe to say Linux is pretty much ready for at least this category of professionals. And it's no surprise, you can get the same sort of experience and tools on Windows with WSL or on macOS with Homebrew, but running Linux, you're one step closer to the OS that your website or web app will actually run on, at least for web developers. And you also avoid a lot of unnecessary steps to actually set up and install all the tools you'll need, which are generally easier to set up and install on Linux than on Windows or macOS. I won't spend too much time on developers because I already covered why Linux is better for most developers in a dedicated video, which you can find in the description of this video. But professionals aren't just developers, right? A professional can be anyone just using a computer, whether it's for office work, for working with AI, for media creation, or a lot of other things. So let's look at these use cases as well. If we take the vast majority of people who will interact with a computer, what do they truly need in their day-to-day job? A web browser, an email client, an Office suite, and a usable interface. On that specific front, Linux has all that's needed. Whether it's KDE for an interface closer to Windows, or GNOME for the simplest thing to use possible, the Linux desktop is one of the most usable out there. It's super legible, super easy to use once installed, and it can be configured in any way necessary. It's easier to install programs there since they're all in one single store and updated from the same place. It has fantastic window management tools. It has great system-wide search. It doesn't interrupt you for updates or to display ads in programs or a start menu. It doesn't make your computer obsolete after an update, and it lets you change all the default apps you use. Whether you personally enjoy using Linux as a desktop or not, or whether it works on your hardware or not, which is another problem that can be solved by buying Linux hardware instead of Windows hardware and trying to run Linux on it, whatever you think of the Linux desktop, one cannot say that it is not ready for the general use case of an office worker. In terms of web browsers, there's no question, we have them all. Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Brave, Vivaldi, the only one that is not on Linux is Safari, and well, if you really wanted to use that, you have GNOME Web that uses the same engine. If you do most of your work in a web browser, Linux is ready. For email clients, we do not have Outlook, which is used by a lot of people, but the web interface might be enough for most people's needs. And if not, we have awesome clients that can replace Outlook, Evolution and Thunderbird. They're both compatible with Exchange, whether natively or through a plugin, and they offer all the features you might want or need to manage your email, calendar invites, tasks, and more. Linux has these tools, it virtually always had them, but what about Office suites? LibreOffice might be a great option for a lot of people, but it does have some compatibility issues with Microsoft formats, and some UX problems, let's face it. But LibreOffice isn't our only choice here. For perfect compatibility, we have access to commercial software, SoftMaker Office, now called FreeOffice, or WPS Office. They're both proprietary, but they run on Linux, they have an interface that is as close as possible to Microsoft Office, and they have near 100% compatibility with Microsoft formats. We also have access to online Microsoft Office, which again is more than enough for most people's needs with an Office suite. So the Office suite barrier really doesn't exist in reality. We have open source tools that will work for most people, and if they don't, we have commercial and proprietary offerings that will definitely work. Now, for media creation, Linux might not seem like an obvious choice. We do lack all of the Adobe programs. No Photoshop, no Audition, no Premiere. But that doesn't mean we don't have tools either. I use DaVinci Resolve to edit videos. It's a tool used by professionals and Hollywood studios to edit videos, to edit audio, and to create visual effects. It basically does what Audition, After Effects, and Premiere do in one single package, and it's available on Linux. We have Blender for VFX. It's open source and used by professionals all around the world. Houdini, a tool used by VFX artists for simulations, it's on Linux. Maya, it's on Linux. Studio One, a professional digital audio workstation, just released a beta for Linux. We have Inkscape, Ardour, Krita, one of the most popular digital drawing apps, OBS, PDF Studio for editing PDF documents, Bitwig, and a lot more. These might not be the tools that 100% of professionals use out there, but they are professional tools, or they are even industry standards. We have these tools, so it's not a matter of Linux not being ready for professionals. It's a matter of some professionals being locked into a tool and not being able to move to another one. Whether you like AI or not, and I personally don't, not until the copyright and intellectual property issues are addressed, whether you like it or not, it's happening. And AI is a professional domain in which Linux is the standard. You need hundreds of devices to process large language models or insanely powerful servers. And these run Linux, not Windows or Mac OS. Most models and deep learning libraries are designed to run on Linux. IBM's AI, Watson, runs on Linux. Amazon's Lex runs on Linux. OpenAI's ChatGPT runs on Linux. DeepMind runs on Linux. There is no AI without Linux today, and AI is professional work. And that's the tip of the iceberg. Cybersecurity professionals mostly use Linux. Almost 100% of supercomputers used for any specific domain run Linux. The whole space industry runs on Linux. A bunch of military systems run Linux. Linux is already being used by thousands, maybe millions of professionals all around the world. And this is only progressing in the right way, which means Linux gains market share as time goes on. The market share of Linux on the desktop is low. There is no denying that. It's listed at barely 3%, far below macOS or Windows. But this doesn't include another operating system, Chrome OS. And I know what you'll say, Chrome OS is not a real Linux distro. Except it is now. It's running a mainline Linux kernel, the GNU tools, and a desktop environment. Recent changes in Chrome OS actually made it more like a regular Linux distro, as it now uses separate processes for the desktop and the browser. The desktop you're using isn't tied to Chrome anymore, and Chrome OS moved to using the regular Mesa drivers as well. Chrome OS is, in any sense of the word, a Linux distribution. It just doesn't run a desktop environment that we usually associate with Linux distros. And Chrome OS has 3.89% market share on the desktop. Combine that with Linux's 3%, and you're close to 7%. It's still way lower than macOS or Windows, which is even way higher than this, but it's a lot of users and computers being used every day by professionals as well as enthusiasts. And the perspectives are good. With the rise of Linux gaming thanks to Valve, Proton, and the Steam Deck, more and more people will move to Linux for their personal use, especially when confronted with the frankly baffling choices Microsoft makes for Windows, like potentially turning it into a subscription service in Windows 12, or including more and more ads and taking control away from the user. As more individuals use Linux for their own computing, they will also push Linux at the companies they work at, slowly but surely. And as this market share rises, more and more companies will bring their software over to Linux. It's just the normal law of supply and demand. If there's a market, they're going to address it. Now, that doesn't mean that Linux is ready for every professional out there. If you absolutely need certain software that is not available, then Linux will not work for you. The best use case is Adobe. If you need to use Adobe products specifically, then you're on your own. Although, since they've recently started moving a lot of the features of Photoshop to the web, there is hope for a fully web-based version that would be completely OS independent. If you need AutoCAD, you won't find it, and alternatives on Linux don't seem as fully fledged. Generally, if you're a professional tied to a specific piece of software that absolutely cannot move to either one of our open source alternatives or one of the commercial offerings available, then sure, Linux will not be ready for you. But I would argue that this isn't necessarily a Linux problem. In most cases, it has the tools that would let you do your professional work. It's more a case of you not being able to or not being willing to move to an alternative piece of software. Professionals all around the world already use Linux daily, whether they're developers, VFX artists, or whether they need to render 3D scenes. Hollywood runs most of their 3D renders on Linux, by the way. Or whether you're just doing office work, you're a student, you're a media creator, you're working with AI. Linux has the tools. They might not be the tools you prefer, or the tools you're used to, or the tools you're allowed to use, but it has these tools. It can do the same job you're doing right now, at least in most cases. And that's not even counting all the ways Linux is actually a better operating system than proprietary offerings. It's faster, it's leaner on system resources, it gives you more control, it's more customizable, it gives you choices, it doesn't make your hardware obsolete overnight, it doesn't force you to apply updates, it doesn't collect personal information, it doesn't display ads. It's actually a more productive operating system. So the next time you see someone saying that Linux isn't for professionals or that it will stay a hobbyist project, then you can either quietly laugh at their outdated opinion, or you can empathize with them for not being able to move to the tools that Linux has to offer that would be able to do the same job that they're doing. But in both cases, you will know that they are wrong. Just like it would be wrong to not tell you about our sponsor, Tuxedo. Tuxedo makes laptops and desktops that ship with Linux out of the box, solving the very simple problem of Linux doesn't run well on my hardware. Well then, stop buying hardware designed to run Windows and buy hardware designed to run Linux. All the components are picked specifically because they're very compatible with Linux. And if they encountered any quirks or bugs, they submit patches upstream to fix those issues for everyone. They have a big range of laptops, desktops, and NUCs that will basically fit every need and every price point. You can customize most of the components inside, you can have your own logo on the lid of your laptop, your own keyboard layout, you decide how your device looks and how it works. And all their laptops can be opened, repaired, and upgraded, including the RAM, the SSD, the battery, and sometimes even the wireless card. So if you need a new computer and you want to run Linux on it, and you want to support Linux's development, click the link in the description below and get yourself a device from Tuxedo. Now, thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. There's a black button, a little bell you can click for notifications, a subscribe button, and a comment section. And if you didn't like the video, you're free to tell me why in the comments and click that dislike button as well. And if you really enjoy the channel, there are plenty of ways to support it. I left links in the description of the video just for that. So thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!